Good morning. I see the chat filling up this morning. Get yourself something warm to drink and let's get huddled in for our Wednesday workday. I want to wish you a very good morning to everyone and a special shout out to our local heroes on the front lines of public service in the great state of Oklahoma. Welcome to our 6th episode of Pivot, a continuous improvement series. My name is S.E. Pewitt, and I have the great privilege of working with statewide learning services under the Office of Management and Enterprise Services. My role is to serve as an instructional designer, and we also provide services such as agency consultation, project management, and I also get to serve as a producer for our podcast, A Seat at the Table. So please check that out at omes.ok.gov. My specialty areas include change management initiatives, project management, and continuous improvement. I'm proud to say that my team at SLS leads the state in engagement opportunities that empower and develop public service professionals, both personally and professionally, to their individual talent apex. So the purpose of Pivot is to create an inclusive approach to continuous improvement practices that sometimes feel foreign and technical and make them more accessible to us in the workplace. We seek to create meaningful learning experiences for our audience, that's you, and improve the structure, strategy, people, and processes that lead to improved employee and customer experiences. Today, I'm very, very pleased to bring in our guest for our 6th episode of Pivot. So today on Pivot, we welcome Cordney McClain to show us how to move from planning your inclusion, diversity, and equity project into implementing it into your organization. Cordney, thank you so much for being here. What do we need to bear in mind when putting our inclusion, diversity, and equity projects into action?
Great question. How can we implement? Which I'll give you just a tidbit of my background. Before November of last year, the year before, 2019, I was in basically corporate America all my professional career. I had been in corporate America for the past 15 years, but I'm also an Army veteran. I'm a 4-time published author. Decent public speaker, a college graduate, a professor. I have really appreciated all of these experiences, understanding that they made me the person I am today. But if you haven't noticed, I am a Black man in America. And these two parts of my identity have profoundly shaped how I see the world and how I navigate within it. For instance, I grew up in the south side of Oklahoma City, and I always felt like my schools were decently diverse, coming from the Middale school system. But when I arrived on the campus, University of Oklahoma in 2003, I had instant culture shock. I had never been around that many white people. And then I was blessed to gain a good job during my time as a college student, in which I was, again, surrounded by a lot of white people. I graduated and got my first big boy job in the oil field, again, surrounded by a lot of white people. Now, this occurrence doesn't automatically deem racism, bigotry, and or microaggressions, but it did. And the outspoken person that I am, I brought these things up to my leadership. And from the days of 2018 up to 2015, they did not know how to handle these issues that I'm speaking of. Now, I had no spit in my face, no water hose was blasted on me trying to walk into my place of employment. I didn't have to come in any back door. No one refused me a seat in the front of a bus. But this racism was different now. It was embedded in a systematic oppression within the companies that have been operating with such prejudice since the company's inception, surrounding promotion, availability, hiring practices, recruiting efforts, opportunity advances. This was the good old boy corporate America dilemma that my elders had warned me about. And now I was in the trenches. And when I brought any issue up, I was now seen as an issue, not a team player. The angry, bigger issue I had to understand was that I was not by myself. Other people of color, other marginalized groups of people had to deal with the same issues that gravely affect their livelihood and their careers. The good news, there's a huge body of knowledge on what works and what doesn't when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are hundreds of studies published in diversity science journals with really relevant findings. The bad news, many D&I approaches to date reflect a very superficial understanding, if not outright misunderstanding of this complex body of knowledge. This has led to widespread failure of D&I efforts, such D&I efforts that's spoken about a lot, which basically are pretty pictures of color broadcasted all over your company website, but with no true plan or mission to execute and implement equity and inclusion. Organizations are not only wasting resources when they do this, in many cases, things end up getting worse because then they're swept under the rug. D&I trainers and consultants, they do not have to be diversity scientists or subject matter experts, in my opinion. However, they do need to find a way to ensure that their approach reflects current knowledge, applying a base of humanity, and also can appeal to the bottom line of profit gain for leadership to buy in. And I'm going to really dig into the bottom line of profit gain today. Let's go to the second slide. Imagine a place where people of all colors and races and gender work in a place that are climbing the runs of corporate America, and they are welcome to bring their unique, unassimilated selves to work because the uniqueness they bring is not just recognized, but respected. And that's by educator Ms. Janet Stovall. Now, I'll go to the third. We'll go into the definitions. But what will we learn today? I like to always start by stating the goals today. We will, one, define diversity, equity, and inclusion. We will then discuss the value that more inclusion in the workplace can offer a company. Then we will, I want to show you that D&I can also save your entity money from being sued and suffer grave losses over millions of dollars, or lose the same amount of because of poor hiring practices and work culture that keeps revolving doors on the hinges of your company's non-inclusive culture. Another, discuss the importance that a sense of belonging offers all employees, and especially those with characteristics outside of the mainstream, marginalized groups of people. We will then identify the ways that workplace diversity and inclusion are advanced through specific behaviors that leaders and employees take in it, right? So let's talk about bias real quick. Now, bias, it's human nature. It's human nature and the limbic brain that causes us to have some type of unconscious bias or prejudice against people who do not look like us. Now, I know everybody's going to say, oh, no, not me, but we all do. We all have subconscious bias. Now, no judgment. It's human nature, and this evolved in the caveman days. You run into someone back then that did not look like you, and you naturally causes concern, right? Who are you? Where do you come from? Don't take my food, right? It's caveman days. Bias was a need to survive. And in business now, inclusion will be the tool that will fix the systematic dilemma to function and thrive in this 21st century and to get us out of the caveman days. Now, in this work, we are speaking to the unnatural, inclusion, being included, including others, valuing and respecting, engaging, fully contributing comes easily for those who perceive themselves as similar, like-minded, and sharing values, perceptives, and experiences. But across differences, inclusion indeed requires attention, intention, and practice. Addressing these challenges, we must use a cross-disciplinary approach critical to success. Research group, dynamics, organizational behavior, organizational development, instructional design, adult learning theory, sociology, all provides insight, tools, and tactics for effectively implementing and leading the implicit and explicit elements of a corporate strategy. And you have to have a corporate strategy behind these things, or you're just faking it. You're just going through the process of what it looks like on your website. But I've seen, for instance, you click on the website and the D&I efforts aren't even there. The page doesn't even exist. You've just done what you're supposed to do for the outside looking in to make it look pretty, like you really truly have diversity in mind, but you don't. So diversity. By definition, the state of being diverse, a variety. So I want you to forget diversity. Just put it out of your brain. throw away diversity, right? So I know you're looking at me crazy. Throw away diversity. Yeah, get rid of it. Because diversity aesthetically is just it's just a buzzword right now. Diversity just makes everything look pretty. It's like diversity is if I like to barbecue, I like to grill, I like to go on grill, right? So if I invite everyone on this platform to my house, and I'm sure I will have a diverse pool of company. But when you get here, I treat you like a stranger. I don't treat you well. I don't want to get you anything to drink. I don't even feed you. I just treat you like trash as soon as you come in my door. That's equity. That's showing you that, yeah, we may have a diverse pool in my living room, in my backyard, but how are you being treated? Do you feel a sense of belonging? Do you feel welcome here? Now that goes to equity. All right, so what will we learn today? We will define diversity, equity, inclusion, discuss the value that more inclusion in the workplace can offer a company, what's all the advantages of true inclusion over just a aesthetic diversity. I want to show you that DE&I can also save your entity money from being sued and suffer losses over millions of dollars or lose the same amount of losses because of poor hiring practices and work culture that keeps revolving doors on the hinges of your company's non-inclusive culture. Discuss the importance that a sense of belonging offers all employees, and especially those with characteristics outside of the mainstream. All right, and we're going to also identify the ways that workplace diversity and inclusion are advanced through specific behaviors that leaders and employees take. Now, I spent a little time, spent 8 years in the military, and one thing that leadership would say is it starts with you. Now, me being a private or a specialist, I knew that wasn't true. Leadership has to be totally on board for change to be really implemented because they're the main hand that stirs the pot when it comes to providing a mission and a direction for a company or any type of organization. And in business now, inclusion will be the tool that will fix the systematic dilemma to function and thrive in this 21st century. Now, in this type of work, we are speaking to the unnatural, right? Inclusion, being included, including others, valuing and respecting, engaging, fully contributing comes easily for those who perceive themselves as similar, like-minded, and sharing values, perceptives, and experiences. But across differences, inclusion indeed requires attention, intentionality, and practice. Addressing these challenges, we must use a cross-disciplinary approach critical to success. Research, group dynamics, organizational behavior, organizational development, instructional design, adult learning theory, sociology, all provides insight, tools, and tactics for effectively implementing and leading the implicit and explicit elements of a corporate strategy. So let's break down the definitions. Diversity. I want you to just take diversity out of your mind, right? Don't even think about diversity. Just throw it away. And I know you're looking at me crazy right now. Diversity is simply, it's sexy right now. It's the buzzword. It's aesthetic, right? So diversity is you coming into my home. I like to barbecue and grill, right? So let's say I invite everybody on the platform to my house. And once you get to my house, we should have a plethora of different type of people in my home, right? In my living room, back to the back, into the, you're flooding my backyard, whole bunch of different hosts of different type of people. But what if as soon as you come in my door, I treat you like a stranger? I don't offer you anything to drink. I'm not even trying to make sure that you're having a good time. You have no sense of belonging. You don't want to stay. And that's the difference between true equity over diversity. Diversity is just what it looks like, what it currently looks like. But equity is appreciating everybody and what they have to offer and making sure that their particular need is satisfied. And that's what we're missing when we're trying to implement these diversity type of efforts. Let's talk about inclusion over diversity. It stated that by 2045, America is projected to be a majority or a minority majority country. So companies should reflect their consumer base. We're looking at the graphs here. People of color, 4% when it comes to the whole organization and what the employees, right? The people of color is 4%. But when you talk about the base of the ethnicity, people of color in the U.S., that's a large, that's a big number. So if your companies aren't reflecting your customer base, that means ignorant things can happen. You know, we talk about different companies having very racial sensitive type of logos or displays on their clothing. You're talking about very insensitive type of commercials pushing directly to maybe a specific demographic, but they're coming off very ignorant, very from a place that's not culturally competent. That's because you don't have enough of the employees in the actual organization that can give you that insight. And, you know, some people be like, well, we don't want to just hire black people to just hire black people. But if your customer base is a large majority of African Americans, you want to have a good base of knowledge to speak directly to your customer base. If your customer base is primarily or a large demographic of African Americans, of Hispanics, of women, you want to make sure you're targeting them right and respectfully. A note to keep in mind: ethnically diverse companies perform 30% better with 24% higher revenue growth per Forbes. Now, like I said, we're going to talk about the money, because when you're speaking to leadership, most leadership does not want to hear about the warm and fuzzy type of answers. They want to get to the bottom line of how this is going to affect their company, and making them feel warm and fuzzy is not going to get it. You have to define the problem and speak directly to how the profit margins are going to be affected and improved. Now, diversity really wasn't a problem for big business in the past few years. Now, I mean, it was a problem. It was an underlining issue, but they wasn't looking at it as a true issue. Now, it's nice to have, and it's the right thing to do to put these initiatives in, but does not truly cause any problems in their mind. The case has been made time and again, though, that diversity fuels innovation, customer insight, but that it is all seems like a no-brainer, right? Like watching your stove catch on fire and wondering if you should use your home fire extinguisher or not, waiting for the signal to pick up on your smoke detectors. We're just going to wait for it. And that's what we kind of do in these companies. All these different biases and racism is going on in your companies. You're having a crazy amount of turnover with employees. All these things are happening, and you're kind of just letting it happen instead of facing it and making sure that you have diversity officers and implementation efforts really implemented to take care of it before it blows up. And that's when the result is your companies can be sued, then or turnover is high. So now you have to pay for a lot of new employees, and that affects benefits at a large state. That affects a lot of your capital when you're having to recycle the process, working the wheels of bringing in new people over and over, because you're not an inclusive company. You don't appreciate employee equity. So the business case really never spoke to the problem, but it needs to be urgent, relevant, and away from color. You need employees and customers, which should look like who and which reflects the world. Your customer base is going to be high in, let's say it right now, African Americans are supposed to be the biggest consumers. So if your company does not reflect or does not mirror what your customer base look like, you're going into a lot of situations trying to speak to a demographic where you have no background knowledge on. So we spoke to the definitions. Now let's go to the next slide. What are ways that the lack of inclusion and equity affect your workplace and business practices? It affects who gets promoted. It affects who is recruited, who gets hired, who is requested for particular accounts, who is asked to travel for business. One example that I have from corporate America is who is asked to travel for business. Now, everyone knows if you're in a dynamic where you present to executives, you have a important customer base where you're presenting to high executives and high leadership. Those opportunities lead to promotion. Those exposure opportunities put you in a different pool of employees that are always looked at to get the next promotion or to continue to get more opportunities that can get you the promotion, to get you that tenure that everyone in corporate America is looking for when you're doing your job and you're doing it well. That's what you're looking for. One thing that a lot of people don't think about is, let's say a man that is very active with his kids, like I am. I, in the past, was looked over for travel opportunities. Those travel opportunities, like I said, leads to more opportunities to speak in front of important people. So because people know, or my leadership knew, that my travel situation was a little skeptical, because I was very much involved in my children's lives. And, when my wife had to work, I was the one picking them up every evening, or I was the one making sure they were going to practices. I was the one that have them most of the weekend. Then, they're looking at Cordney like, well, he can't make this trip anyway. That's not being inclusive. That some of those opportunities, they won't even ask you. A lot of times this happens to women when they are the primary caregivers. They're not even afforded the opportunity. They're not even asked the question, can you make this travel? Because this travel will be very, very beneficial for your promotion, because you'll be in front of some top executives. Those things aren't even thought of, because they're kind of just swept under the rug. And then some people don't even know how to directly complain about it, because it's like, at the end of the day, it's my kids. What do I do? I'm not going to not do for my kids. And that puts you in a situation where your equity is not looked at. What you provide to the company isn't even thought of truly, because now it's like, what can you do for me now? And that's what leadership is thinking. What can you do for me now? I know you've done this, but you can't make this trip. So when it comes to promotion time, you may be looked over. So this, it affects more than just color. When you put in a young man or a man, period, and the girl dad, like I am a girl dad, you put them in that pool, then you're not being inclusive to someone that's very active with their children. So when you're looking at equity and inclusion, it's a broad scale, and a lot of these different things that we sweep over and we're not taking into account. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see. Okay. So, like I said, diversity wasn't a real problem until we started making the cases of fueling innovation, providing customer insight, like I talked about, improving internal morale. Let's go into internal morale. Now, going back to promotion scales and the ability to leverage everything that you're doing for a company into being promoted or more money. Let's just put that out there. Money is a motivator. And as an employee, if you're not getting the money, you start showing up later, or you're not showing up at all. Your work starts to lag. Then they're looking at leadership is looking at you like, well, you're not a top performer anyway. So when it comes to promotion, you're not even in the conversation. But you're not in the conversation because of other things that happen that has built up to now you taking a back seat at possible opportunities that you would have jumped at, even if it was like for the free. When they say, oh, this is a great opportunity, it usually means you're going to put in some overtime that that you may not really be appreciated by leadership. Those opportunities a lot of times can be overtime, and the overtime is unpaid. So let's just be realistic about that. We have to identify the target demographic growth. Like I said, if your demographic that you're selling to, your customer base is growing in Hispanics, but you have a low Latinx community or employee base, that's going to be an issue. It's going to be a dilemma when you're trying to gain the demographic that you're pointing at, because you don't have that background. You don't have that cultural competency background in your company to make those strategic and informative, I use that word, informative decisions on who you're marketing to. So this little scale right here is talking exactly to what it takes to really implement. We're talking about diversity dynamic, defining your internal drivers, which is the profit game. When you define the profit game for your leadership, that has the light bulbs coming on, because they're usually used to someone coming to them talking about things about sense of belonging. Sense of belonging is very important, but that's not really what you want to lead with. You want to lead with profit margins, capital, ability to earn more vendors and partnership growth and donors. All the money talk will then in turn improve sense of belonging, because it improves ability for leadership in the company to provide more promotion, which promotion, if you're getting paid for the work that you're doing and the commitment that you're driving, that grows the sense of belonging. So we have to keep that in mind when speaking to leadership. I just reiterate that because a lot of people ask, how do we get these diversity efforts to be passed by leadership? You have to speak to the money. Speak to the money. I spoke about fosters improved turnover, effectively mirrors your customer base, all of which business, like I said, did not care about until you speak to the bottom line. And we have to speak to the bottom line because we have to speak to leadership language. And leadership language is focused on the money. And how is all this accomplished, right? Non-inclusive versus faking the value. I love this conversation. I have this conversation often because the communication is fundamental. You have to establish the actual work environment. The message is, we value all of you. It must blare out from every corner on all levels. For example, images of employees, even hired models, on the company's website and its brochures should reflect different ages, races, and genders. Employees chosen to speak at corporate functions or to receive awards should include an appropriate race, age, and gender mix. Training courses where networking and bonding take place should incorporate a diverse mix of employees so that you can get to know and trust each other. All employees must receive the training, mentoring, and coaching needed to maximize their ability to succeed in the organization. You'll hear people say, I've been working here for years, but I see such and such. They have the escalator up to success because from outside looking in, they've seen this particular individual seem like they're just going up and going up, while that person has just been working and working, may even had trained that person that has now become their boss. So you have to assess those different things. So assess, do you really want this? Is your company prepared for what we will find or see or lack thereof? If the answer is no, just be honest with yourself and within the organization, be honest. It's much better to be okay being non-inclusive than faking something you are not nor value. And find out, where are you currently? Do we have any essential programs that already exist? Because if you have nothing and you need to start from the bottom, you need to understand that you're starting from the bottom. And that means that you are assessing what you already have, understanding that maybe you don't have a diversity council. You don't have anything that presents affinity groups for specific marginalized groups of people at your company. If you don't have anything like that, then you need to start at the bottom and build up instead of this fake type of manifested imagery of that, oh yeah, we're all inclusive here. All my employees feel a sense of belonging here and they're happy to be here. If you have this manifested like delusional mindset in leadership, then it's really going to affect the rest of it. So that's assessing. Now, aspiration. What do you want from it? What is the benchmark of what other organizations in your industry may be doing? Use SMART goals around DE&I. We use SMART goals all the time to make sure that we are effective on our proposals with our customers and to make sure that we're executing our industries. Do the same thing with your DE&I effort. So make a plan. According to Delivery Through Diversity, a 2018 report from McKinsey & Company by Vivian Hunt, based on publicly available data from 1,007 companies across 12 countries, Diversity and inclusion can boost financial performance and innovation over time. Therefore, there should be a long-term plan to include diversity at all levels of the organization. You know, just like I know, within a company, if you don't have long-term, if your leadership isn't giving you a long-term type of plan for what's going on, they're not serious about it. You know that. They're not serious about it. One example I like to use is President John F. Kennedy addressing NASA in 1962. He said, well, take for instance, what if he would have said, we will go to the moon in this decade, versus what we usually have in our diversity committees, versus we're going to form a space committee, or we just care about going to the moon. What do you usually hear in your company? What do you usually hear? We care about equal gender rights. That's not making anything measurable. See, what President John F. Kennedy said, he says, we will go to the moon in this next decade. So he verbalized what he wanted to accomplish. Then he made it measurable. We will go to the moon in this decade. In the next 10 years, we will go to the moon. As making it measurable. And to the moon as in what did he want to accomplish? He made it measurable and he made it time bound. So remember, when you're making a plan, you need to verbalize it, make it measurable, and make it time bound. And that's the difference between just saying, oh, we care about equal hiring rights at our company. Got to be specific. For instance, we care about diversity hiring and we value marginalized people here at this company or institution. You verbalize what you care about. You didn't make anything measurable, and you didn't put a timestamp on anything. So you're basically just putting a general statement out there that you care about diversity hiring, but what do you plan to do with it? So what you should hear from leadership is, we will achieve racial and gender equity in our hiring processes in 3 years. That makes your company and your leadership more accountable. They verbalized it, they made it measurable, and they put a timestamp on exactly when they want to accomplish it. And that's the difference between these general statements within the diversity realm and really, really being intentional. The next one, action. Focus groups, strategic planning, surveys, and building core areas to focus on recruiting, retention, inclusion, and focus on improving your public perception. You have to have focus groups and strategic planning and surveys around these different efforts. If you're not pouring into the funding, and we miss a lot of this, you have a lot of situations where a company will want to do diversity efforts, but they won't appoint anyone. And the appointing someone is very crucial. It's very crucial to implementation, because if I already have a day job at a company that, maybe have some high turnover because of low sense of belonging, so I may be doing 2 or 3 other people's jobs. So I'm already bogged down, but I have this passion in me about diversity and inclusion efforts. So what's going to happen is leadership is going to give me some things I'm doing in the evenings and on the side for free. Now, everyone knows if you love someone, if you love something, or you have a passion about something, or you want to make sure something happens, you're going to pour money into it. So that's a crucial thing about resources, manpower, and funding. Funding needs to be behind your D&I effort, and putting a director or someone where all of their efforts goes to that and they're getting paid for it is very crucial. Making it a general type of effort for employees, a workforce that already has a day job, that's kind of doing it on the side. It's not really taking the effort serious. This has been shown in plenty of other companies where they do it on the side. And I say do it on the side because it's an afterthought. It's something to the effect of, I can't pour all of my energy into it because then my day job suffers. Then your day job suffers. Now, when your day job suffers, then your leadership is really going to be on your back. So we all understand the dynamic behind having to do something in overtime or in the evenings, or they have to working on it on the weekend. That should be someone's job. There should be someone's 9 to 5 job. and it should be funded. And that should be a person in a particular director, officer position, or whatever have you, at your company that that is specific for that purpose. If your company and your leadership is really taking diversity and inclusion serious, the investment in diversity strategies include talent development, learning, performance management, and retention of top talent to be future leaders in the organization. This is a whole culture shift that I'm talking about. It requires commitment and patience. For instance, a high performance culture. Leaders can own the employee engagement process by leading focus groups to identify ways of enhancing the employee's experience throughout the organization. So you give someone the tools to learn exactly how you want them to be influential and execute, but you just basically saying, okay, marginalized groups of people, you want a sense of belonging, you want a diversity council, have at it. And you give them a small portion of a budget. The motivation is low. Even if they want to improve the culture, even if they want to improve the culture of the company, the leadership isn't showing that they're truly on board. Because leadership showing that they're truly on board, they would be backed with manpower, resources, the effective ways to implement the right information. Even if you have to outsource the information at first, have it implemented, and then teach and train your internal employees how to do it themselves. But you at least should have a director or officer who runs all of that, so they can have their minds already working on it, and they know their particular effort is directly on diversity and inclusion efforts. If you don't have that, then you're not really taking it serious. You're not really taking it serious. You have to have the funding and the intentionality behind it to really be really make a true culture shift. And leadership has to be on board. That goes into training your team, understanding the existing organizational culture. You have to examine the level of receptiveness to potential training and coaching programs. That means you have to kind of feel out what can you throw at your company culture. You can't throw everything at your company culture at first, because you may be, like I said, back in the caveman times where inclusion is very, very foreign to the demographic that you're speaking to at your company. You may need to start slow. And that's producing like mutual respect of culture differences. To me, that's basic humanity talk. The cultural sensitivity skills training that you have to develop. Now, culture sensitivity skills training, all of this takes a lot of time, a lot of specific manpower that needs to be delegated to these tasks. It's hard to do that when you're just giving it to someone to do on the side, while they, like I said, have a regular 9-to-5 job that they know they can't let that ball drop either. Building bridges through knowledge and understanding. And so the affinity groups, one, it teaches all about the particular marginalized group. And when done right, the different affinity groups will speak to each other to then build knowledge across those bridges that may have never been broken down in the first place. So affinity groups done well will not be seclusion, but will be a way to infiltrate each other in a cultural competency type of way. So then we marry up and understand our differences between people of color and the majority. So it's not, the affinity group does not create a situation where everyone is secluded, but more of a way we can understand each other. And if you're in a marginalized group or a person of color as such, it gives you the opportunity to praise your own culture and others to come in and understand and get to know your culture as well. Because trust and believe, affinity groups, they're not supposed to be not inclusive. They're supposed to provide and pull in more. Think about the HBCU. We'll go into application. An example, you're recruiting more diversity than when we set up career fairs at HBCUs. Like, put to work the actual action items that line up with the aspirations. You have the aspirations to be more inclusive, to keep employees operating as a team, to build these bridges through knowledge and understanding. But if you go to a particular school and you don't have the right mind frame around recruiting, then you're not putting in action everything that you said was on your action plan, which the action plan and the mission, it should come from leadership. Leadership and the subject matter experts who want to dive into diversity and inclusion, they should be having a very, very open dialogue with what they want to accomplish. And the mission at hand should be built around understanding these things. And leadership should be on board. Because if leadership isn't on board, again, I will say it, the money will not be there. The support won't be there. The manpower and resources will not be there for your D&I efforts. Application. Build in inclusion. Weave in diversity and inclusion in your organizational values, mission statement, vision, marketing plan, and public image. Inclusion should be all in those things. Even if your company has to rewrite the mission statement and the values, diversity and inclusion should be all in there. This begins with the commitment to building a diverse workforce that's inclusive of others. A strong, diverse culture incorporates many different perspectives and outlooks. For example, with a strategic onboarding process that's thoughtfully and excellently administered with development opportunities that contribute to a strong culture, shared experiences, explaining, like for example, I had a coworker that I worked with for years. She was great at her job, but when it came to anything outside of that, especially if we start talking about what's going on with Black Lives Matter and such, she couldn't relate at all. And me and another coworker used to try to bring her to an understanding of, police brutality and such, and even the history behind it. And she couldn't get a grasp on it at all. And then one day she went to a diversity and inclusion training that spoke directly to really women and white privilege. And when we bring up white privilege, it's not saying that anyone white has never went through struggle, but have you ever went through trials and tribulations specifically because of the color of your skin? So, but it's the shared experiences. So with her shared experience was she was specifically in a room where women were talking about things that they went through in corporate America. And when she had that shared experience, she was able to understand as a minority, a Black man in America, some of the things that I may have been dealing with, because now we found a common ground. And a common ground is very influential when it comes to breaking down these barriers to then build a whole new culture for your company. Assessment. This is the second part. Assessment 2.0. So you assess where we started as a company versus where we ended. Adjustments needed, metrics met or failed. Metrics. So I love quantitative research, but I really, really love qualitative research. Quantitative is going to give you the numbers. It's going to give you what leadership needs to make those decisions based around money and numbers and such, right? But the qualitative is the meat because it gives you the story. It gives you exactly why that person, like for instance, the exit interviews in the company, I would say is more qualitative because it gives you exactly the meat of why that employee felt the need that it was time for he or she to leave that environment, to leave that company. And you need that information to then translate to tell the story of what you need to fix in your culture to keep your valued employees. So in assessment 2.0, take responsibility. Very key. Diversity and inclusion may create discomfort. It's supposed to. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. If you're in a space, speaking on diversity and inclusion, where everything is super comfortable and everybody's being so politically correct, you're not going to get anything accomplished because everybody's in there being super polite. I'm talking about tactful ways where you can have a discussion. So you have to understand some of these things are going to be uncomfortable.
That's powerful. I want to step in real quick, Cordney, and thank you so much for your time today on that. I know that we're running a little long, and that's fine because we definitely want to share some more resources with you. I do want to take a moment to kind of review some of the points that Director McClain shared with us today. Our organization, no matter what it is, your nonprofit, your profit, your state, any level of community service, The diversity initiative must be more than the aesthetic. And whether your organization has existing diversity and inclusion practices, I want to refer back to what we saw in the chat several times. It had the behavior, the practice has to reflect what the policy says. It has to reflect what the metrics are telling us. It has to reflect what the mission and goals are that we have lined out for that. We absolutely have to remain open to ways to assess, enhance, and even integrate what is currently in place to cultivate a culture of not only inclusion, but collaboration. And breaking down those silos is so vital in today's workforce. I always love bringing on the best and brightest in public service from the great state of Oklahoma to provide our public service superheroes like yourself with field experiences and direct insight on our continuous improvement subject areas. Now, what Cordney did not mention is that when he's not serving as the Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity for the Price College of Business at the University of Oklahoma, he also completed his undergraduate work in business communications before finishing his master's in business administration. He also serves as a mentor for the Oklahoma City Police Department Juvenile Outreach Program. He also sits on the board for both the Star Foundation at Metro Tech and the Blackmail Initiative at the University of Central Oklahoma. If that wasn't impressive enough, he is also a veteran of the Oklahoma Army National Guard. I know that he just mentioned that early on in his presentation. He is a published author, a spoken word artist, and an actor who was featured in the film Black Wall Street Burning, which premiered in Tulsa just before the COVID outbreak and just in time for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial. So be sure to check that out. I know that we have several OU alums here in the chat with us today. Cordney McClain can be reached at area code 405-325-4118 or at CD McClain, that's CDMCCLAIN at OU.edu. And I want to introduce you to one more resource before we close up for today. All right, so LinkedIn Learning opportunity for this episode of Pivot. How do we initiate this process? What is the how-to? What is the logistics? So for this particular LinkedIn Learning, Dr. Stephanie Johnson provides relatable and tangible insight in less than 30 minutes. I've been able to use it frequently when conducting consultations for our state agency partners who are also seeking to implement I.D.E.A. or Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity in Action programming within their own team. So you can definitely access this video using your LinkedIn Learning account. As a state employee with an employee ID number, you already have access to this. And so I really want to encourage you to carve out an hour of your day to continuously improve yourself, either professionally or personally. Either way, the goal is to constantly seek something that's going to enhance the quality of our lives. And what we understand about ourselves as humans is that we do get bored. Sometimes we have short attention spans, and sometimes we need fresh material to keep our minds fed. But we get our best and brightest ideas from our customers. So please keep those coming and email your ideas and your questions from our superheroes in public service to pivot@agency.ok.gov. We greatly appreciate you spending your morning with us. I really want to express my gratitude to not only our facilitator today, Director Cordney McClain, but to our Pivot team, which is comprised of our consultant, Ann Glenzer, which I see that she's here in the group today. So thank you for being here, Ann, and seeing this thing through for us. And our producer and engineer, Janet Jones, who has been graciously attending to any sound quality issues that you might have. We had a lot of fun with your interaction today, and we are so impressed with the feedback that this audience has to offer. Okay, like I always say, like I just said, we get our best ideas from our customer. In this case, our audience, that's you. So please keep them coming. In the meantime, join us next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time right here on Adobe Connect as we roll out episode 7, where we get to sit down with Derek Niedig from the Workforce Planning Team at the Office of Management and Enterprise Services, and he's going to talk to us about succession planning, which is something that's being rolled out with every state agency as we speak. This is a big event that's being rolled out. And so we had to get our hands on him to find out what this thing is all about and how we can get involved to be better informed and to also provide insights that can help our agency succession planning. So please reach out and share your diversity, inclusion, and equity project stories at pivot@agency.ok.gov. We would love to feature them on the show. Until then, be good to yourselves, be good to one another, and go be great today.